If you're wondering why the king put so much faith in Tran Canh, it wasn't just about family ties. The guy wasn't just some royal nephew coasting on a famous last name. He was a walking, talking military cheat code. From childhood, he was raised in Thang Long under the watchful eye of his aunt, the king's younger sister, while the royal court kept close tabs on his development. Meanwhile, his father, who had a serious grudge against the Tran throne, was dead set on training him to overthrow the Tran Dynasty. He basically scouted the best mentors, combat masters, and strategists to train Canh, hoping his son would one day take revenge. Ironically, all this top-tier training didn't turn Canh into a usurper. It turned him into the kingdom's ultimate defender. His elite Ngin troops, the very same army his father had assembled to overthrow the Tran court, had instead become the kingdom's strongest shield. Fast forward to 1283, the Mongols came back for round 2, and this time, things were different. For one, Chen's talent and loyalty were now impossible to deny. And second, there was no Tran Thurji around to say no, because, well, he passed away. So when the war drums started beating again and Dai Viet needed a leader, the Tran emperor didn't waste time debating. They handed Canh absolute military command, trusting him to pull off another miracle. We promised you this story would be epic. Are you feeling it yet? If so, drop a great exclamation in the comments. But don't go anywhere just yet, because things are about to get even wilder. The Tran Dynasty's ultimate gamble is just getting started. Tran Canh had outplayed the Mongols before, but now the enemy wasn't just testing the waters. They were diving in headfirst with their entire military might. This was an all-in-or-die showdown against the most powerful war machine on the planet. So what's Tran Chen's next move? How do you outmaneuver an enemy that already knows all your tricks? By November 1284, things were getting serious. Tran Chen's first major move was to advance to Hong Bien-a. Hum, 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 flew. Hum, 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 where he conducted a massive military inspection before ordering his forces to fortify every key mountain pass, river crossing, and practically anywhere a Mongol could stub his toe, aiming to wear down the Mongol invaders. With every step they took onto Tran territory, the strategy was simple: attrition. At the mountain passes, large armies could not easily maneuver, and the defenders could use smaller forces to counter much larger enemy contingents. Tran Canh established his command center at New Bam in what is now Bsejiang province, surrounding this stronghold with several satellite defensive positions designed to provide mutual support and facilitate swift retreats or advances. These interconnected posts ensured that the enemy could not make any significant progress without facing relentless counterattacks. While Canh handled the battlefield, the king focused on something just as important: getting everyone on the same page. So he held a big strategy meeting where all the top generals and lords gathered to figure out how to deal with the upcoming Mongol storm. The decision was clear: no deals, no compromises, fight. They were all in. naval forces prepared to support defensive strongholds, ensuring flexibility in both attack and retreat. King Tran himself led a powerful fleet at Thang Long, symbolizing his direct involvement in the kingdom's survival and ready to respond to the fluctuating demands of the battlefield. Alongside military preparations, the Tran Dynasty made extensive logistical arrangements. Supply caches were strategically positioned across the land, ensuring that the forces would never be short of resources during prolonged engagements. Under the guidance of local leaders, villagers organized their own militias and contributed foodstuffs and other supplies, creating a robust civilian military network of support that was crucial to the defense. At this time, up north, Togan was getting his troops ready at the border. By January 1285, they reached deeper into Dai Viet's land. The Vietnamese court saw this coming a mile away, but instead of panicking, the emperor decided to send Togan a letter. If you read between the lines, it basically said, "Oh mighty Togan, your brilliance is simply blinding. I hear you're just passing through on your way to attack Champa. But funny thing, I couldn't help but notice your camps in Yangzhou look rather permanent. Surely a man of your noble character wouldn't be planning an invasion, right? If we've done anything to upset you, do let us know." Togan immediately wrote back something along the lines of, "Nah, don't worry. We're just on our way to Champa, nothing to see here." But by then, his troops were already marching into Dai Viet territory, of course. While the letters were still flying back and forth, the Mongol army wasn't exactly waiting around for a reply. By January 27, 1285, the invasion was in full swing. The border clashes were brutal. Dai Viet defenders fought like cornered tigers, but sheer numbers were not in their favor. Realizing they were about 3 steps away from disaster, they did the smart thing: a tactical retreat. Fall back to the forests, melt into the mountains, and regroup at fortified positions. Feeling pretty confident, Togan decided to send a nice little letter to Tran Thu Do, politely suggesting, "Why don't you save yourself the trouble and surrender?" Thu Do read it, probably laughed, and immediately tossed it into the nearest fire. So it's February 2nd, 1285, and Togan decides that one invasion route is too basic. Instead, he splits his army into 6 columns because, apparently, he wants to attack everywhere at once. Tran Thu Do knew this was bad news. Fighting head-on wasn't an option, so he did the next best thing: ordered his troops to split up into smaller units and make a beeline for the Lcc Nam River, where boats were waiting to ferry them to the stronghold of Vien Kimp, a place that basically functioned as the ultimate comeback zone. Yeah, well, plans are only as good as reality allows. The battle at Unai Bung turned into an absolute mess. Swords clashed, arrows zipped through the air, and soldiers scrambled to avoid getting turned into Mongol trophies. Most of the troops managed to reach the riverbank in time, hopped on boats, and made their graceful exit. But guess who was still stuck in the middle of the action? That's right, Tran Thu Do himself. The Mongols had cut off communications. Soldiers were retreating in different directions, and worst of all, the Mongols captured a bunch of Dai Viet boats. This was a big problem. Those boats were built for these waters, maneuverable and perfect for outpacing an enemy. With the Mongols getting their hands on them, their advantage was slipping away. With no easy way out, Quoc Tun was staring at a tough choice. Stay and fight, risk getting captured, or try his luck through the mountains. None of these options were great, but then a group of his men refused to leave. These soldiers were ride or die levels of devotion. They stayed behind, risking everything to make sure their commander got out alive, and thanks to them, Tran Quoc Tun slipped away, dodging capture at the last possible moment. He lived to fight another day. For all their terrifying reputation, the Mongols somehow botched the pursuit. Maybe they got overconfident, maybe they were too busy looting, or maybe they just needed a break. Either way, their failure to press the attack gave the Dai Viet forces a golden opportunity to slip away and regroup at Vien Kimp. Some soldiers, exhausted and demoralized, deserted, but the majority, battered yet unbowed, made it to Vien Kimp, where they reassembled under the command of Tran Quoc Tun. Meanwhile, Spock and Thang Long, word of the setback reached King Tran Nan Tang. Concerned, he immediately set out by small boat to meet Tran Quoc Tun at Vien Kimp. Upon arrival, the king got straight to the point. The Mongols are here to seize our land and spill blood across our fields. Their strength is undeniable. Should we surrender to save our people's lives? This was no simple question, but Tran Quoc Tun's response was pure legend. Your Majesty's words are those of a compassionate ruler, but what of our ancestral shrines? What of our nation's future? If you must surrender, then execute me first. As long as my head remains, our kingdom shall endure. Reassured by his commander's absolute, unshakable determination, the king nodded. He returned to Thang Long, wasting no time in preparing the navy for reinforcements. So you're telling me Vietnam beat the Mongols because of a fortune teller? A fortune teller. Yeah, I had the same reaction, but believe it or not, one sentence from this mystical lady completely changed the course of Vietnamese history. And here's what she said. This is the fate of a great minister, one who will build a career so legendary that people around the world will look up to him. Even 1,000 years from now, he will still be revered. In other words, his fate is the fate of a saint. Just like that, Vietnam's ride or die leader against the Mongols was chosen. Yes, we're talking about the Mongols here, a force of nature, a medieval apocalypse. No one beat the Mongols. Going up against them, you either died fighting or you lived just long enough to wish you had. Trust me, this story only gets wilder. Stick around because I'm about to break this down piece by piece. And while you're here, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button so we can reach our 15,000 follower goal. Because if a fortune teller can change the fate of an entire country with one sentence, you can definitely change this channel with one click. It's the latter half of the 13th century, and the relationship between Dai Viet and the Yuan Empire was beyond hopeless. Diplomacy was dead. This was an empire-sized grudge match waiting to happen, and to make sure there were no surprises this time, Kublai Khan went all out, assembling an absolute monster of an invasion force. We're talking 500,000 troops, 500,000 warriors pulled from every corner of the Yuan Empire. Leading the charge were the elite Mongol cavalry. battle-hardened warriors from the endless steppes, flanked by their equally fierce neighbors, Khitan, Turkic, and Uyghur riders who had spent their lives in the saddle. Then there were the Han Chinese cavalry and infantry, the backbone of Kublai's forces. These were seasoned veterans who had fought in the brutal Mongol Song Wars, and fresh off their conquest of the southern Song, Kublai also rounded up a large force of ex-Song troops. They had skills, but let's just say their enthusiasm for fighting wasn't quite at Mongol levels. He also threw in warriors from Tibet, Yunnan, and the Tangut people, plus a navy of elite troops from Hainana. Little bit of everything, just in case. This massive multicultural invasion force had one huge advantage. It could handle any terrain or weather condition: mountains, swamps, dense jungles, no problem. But there was one big issue. Sure, they could all fight, but with so many different backgrounds, languages, and fighting styles, could they fight together well? That was another story. Entire regions of the Yuan Empire were being drained dry to fund this war. People were taxed into oblivion, grain stockpiles vanished, and everything that wasn't nailed down got shipped to the front. Even medicine was stockpiled in preparation because Kublai had learned a hard lesson from the last invasion. Vietnam's climate did unplay fair, and neither did its diseases. Compared to the first invasion in 1258, this Yuan war machine was bigger, stronger, and way more prepared. The entire Yuan Viet border was buzzing with construction crews, forts, roads, supply depots, the whole works. Two major forward bases emerged, one in Yunnan, the other in Yangzhou. The Yuans were pouring troops southward, setting the stage for a full-scale invasion. Headlining the show was Togon Kublai's ninth son and the official Yuan invasion frontman. This guy wasn't some prince lounging around in silk robes. He had a reputation for ruthless suppression, and now he was about to bring that energy south. But even a Yuan prince needs a killer supporting cast. So enter Arik Kaya and Li Heng. These two were some of the deadliest players in the Mongol war machine, racking up so many victories that they were ranked among the empire's top war heroes. And if that wasn't enough, Togon's army was stacked with even more battle-hardened commanders, all ready to carve their way into Ly Viet. But Togon wasn't done. He had a third attack route in mind. Sagatu, the Yuan commander in the Champa invasion campaign, would storm north and hit Ly Viet from below. In theory, this was brilliant. A three-pronged death grip squeezing Ly Viet from Yunnan, Yangzhou, and Champa. The goal was not just to crush Ly Viet fast, but to kickstart a conquest across all of Southeast Asia. So what's happening on the Ly Viet side of things? Who's running the war effort? That would be Tran Quick Tune, the top military commander of the entire country. If you've been following along since part 1, you already know this guy's story. He's the mastermind who laid out the grand strategy that stopped the first Mongol invasion. But, funnily enough, despite holding the top military position, he never actually led an army into battle himself. Was it because he was some arrogant genius, so confident in his own plans that he didn't even need to step onto the battlefield? Well, quite the opposite. He wasn't allowed to go. Why? Because his dad was a full-on rebel. raising an army against the Tran Dynasty and leaving behind a deathbed wish that his son should one day take the throne. For the full story on the father-son drama that nearly upended the dynasty, make sure to check out our previous episodes. But for now, let's get back to the action. And since the entire country knew about that little detail, nobody in their right mind would hand over the entire army to a guy whose dad tried to overthrow the government. That's just basic logic. And yet, they did. They made Tran Thu the supreme commander of Dai Viet's military. This 25-year-old man got the job even before the Mongols invaded the first time because of one sentence from one woman. Madame H. She wasn't just any court lady. She was brilliant. She was born in the fallen Song dynasty, and she decided to stick around in Dai Viet when her homeland crumbled. By the time she was 16, she was already a royal consort and the court's resident fortune-teller/astrologer. And one day, when the royal court was agonizing over what to do with Tran Thu, she went, "Relax. This guy has the destiny of a saint. He's literally built to destroy invaders." Tran Canh was still sweating bullets. He knew that if he picked the wrong person, it wouldn't just be game over for the Tran Dynasty. He himself might end up meeting a very unfortunate end. Sensing the king's hesitation, Madame H doubled down. "Your Majesty, you're afraid he'll take the throne, right?" "Not happening. Because if he does, history will remember him as a traitorous villain. And this man was born to be a hero, not a usurper. That's just how his fate is written." And if Tran Canh was sweating bullets over handing the army to Tran Thu, then Tran Thu Do, the real power behind the throne, was basically having a full-blown panic attack. This guy was the mastermind behind half the royal drama of the Tran Dynasty. He was the man who wiped out the rebel army of Tran Thu's father. The only reason the old man made it out alive. The king himself had to throw down a royal veto and physically block Thud's sword to protect his brother. So when the question came up years later, should we put Tran Thu in charge of the military? You can imagine Thud's reaction. Madame H knew there was no way to argue with Tran Thu head-on. The night before the official meeting to decide who would command the army to fight the Mongols, she handed him a piece of paper, saying, "I wrote a poem for you, dear Grand Chancellor, to celebrate your long and prosperous life. I hope you accept it." So Tran Thu Do politely accepted it, went home, and only then did he open it. It wasn't just a poem. It was a receipt. "Hey, remember when you lost a bet to me and agreed to do 3 things? You already did the first one. Now it's time for the second. Whatever the king decides tomorrow about the army, you don't interfere." The next morning, 200 officials sat dead still as Tran Canh finally stood up and made his decision. Tran Thu was officially the supreme military commander of Dai Viet. Tran Thu Do looked like he had just bitten into a lemon. But what could he do? Madame H had already boxed him into a logic trap, and he wasn't about to break a promise he himself had made. Did he still worry that Tran Thu might someday turn against the Tran family? Absolutely. What if Tran Thu actually followed his father's dying wish and went full revenge mode? Thudji had countermeasures in place just in case things went sideways. If Quoc Tun was going to be a threat, best to keep him right there under his watchful eye, within arm's reach. Tran Quoc Tun got to work. He didn't just sit around delivering dramatic speeches. He rebuilt the army from the ground up. Recruitment efforts spread across nearby provinces, bringing in a fresh wave of soldiers. Reinforcements from northeastern Ly Viet added to the numbers. Sure, some of these new troops were green as fresh bamboo shoots, but numbers mattered, and morale soared at the sight of a growing army. Quoc Tun set up a new defensive formation stretching from Bse Jiang to Vien Kind, essentially turning Ly Viet's landscape into a giant Mongol trapping mousetrap. Bse Jiang became the sturdy front gate, standing firm between the Mongols and the imperial capital, Thang Long. Meanwhile, Vien Kind was the war room, the rallying point for counterattacks and sneak attacks. Speaking of Mongols, after steamrolling their way through New Ly Bant, they managed to take control of North Ly Viet. Turns out, conquering land is one thing. Keeping it is a whole other nightmare. See, the moment they set up camp, they found themselves dealing with a serious case of guerrilla warfare chaos. Small bands of Ly Viet troops, along with local ethnic militias, refused to accept Mongol rule. Worse yet, the Mongols soon realized that expanding their occupied territory meant spreading themselves way too thin. Every new patch of land meant more troops had to be stationed to guard it, more soldiers assigned to protect supply routes, and more headaches for their commanders. It was like trying to hold on to too many grocery bags at once, so eventually something was going to slip. But let's give the Mongols some credit. They weren't fools. Thanks to their local spies and scouts, they quickly pieced together Ly Viet's strategy. They saw the trap forming. Vien Kind was the hammer, Thang Long was the anvil. And if they weren't careful, they'd be the unlucky piece of iron getting smashed in between. So what did they do? They flipped the board. They decided to go straight for Vien Kind. Instead of kicking down the front door, they were going to smash through the side entrance and then waltz into the main hall. They raided local villages, stole wooden planks, and set up makeshift shipyards to crank out warships. Add that to the warships they had already captured from earlier, and they had a decent little fleet to play with. And Omar, who wasn't just a great general, but also a master of naval warfare, was put in charge of this newly assembled aquatic nightmare. With their plan locked in, the Mongols launched their assault on February 11, 1285. Omar led the first strike, a brutal attack with 300,000 troops hitting Vien Kind from multiple directions. Meanwhile, Togan kept the remaining forces in reserve, waiting to reinforce weak points or exploit any breakthroughs. The battle kicked off with a thunderous naval assault. Omar's fleet crashed into Ly Viet's river defenses, which were manned by just 1,000 soldiers. But the Mongols weren't just coming by water. On land, their cavalry and infantry swept in along the riverbanks, creating a relentless pincer attack. It was an all-out, no-holds-barred offensive designed to overwhelm Ly Viet's forces before they could even think about retreating. Despite the intensity of the Mongol onslaught, Ly Viet's forces, leveraging a formidable fleet and seasoned naval troops, mounted a strong defense. Every time the Mongols tried to push forward, Ly Viet's defenders smacked them right back. On land, they held the advantage due to their fearsome reputation of superior cavalry. Ly Viet's carefully constructed fortifications and strategic planning allowed them to withstand the onslaught. But the tides on the river remained in Ly Viet's favor. Their sailors could probably navigate those waters blindfolded. So while the Mongols had the upper hand on land, on the water, they were getting absolutely dunked on. King Tran Nantang wasn't about to sit back and let his soldiers handle this alone. When he got word that things were getting intense, he rolled in with an entire armada. We're talking 1,000 warships and 100,000 fresh troops, bringing Ly Viet's total forces to 300,000. For 3 days straight, over 500. Soldiers clashed in an epic battle at Vien Kimpe, with neither side able to claim a decisive victory. Just a whole lot of exhausted soldiers wondering if this was really how they wanted to spend their week. At least one soldier probably thought, "Man, I should have stayed a farmer." By February 14, 1285, things were looking dicey for Ly Viet. Tran Quoc Tuon and King Tran Nantang did some quick math and realized, maybe it's time to go. But when most armies retreat, it's a mess. Thanks to Ly Viet's naval supremacy, the army hopped on board and zipped down the Hung River, straight back to Thang Long. Of course, this wasn't a free pass. Someone had to stay behind and hold the line, buying time for the main force to escape. They fought like warriors in a last stand, keeping the Mongols occupied long enough for the bulk of the army to slip away. Omar was desperately trying to block their retreat, but guess what? It's failed. His fleet simply wasn't built for the type of fast, coordinated river maneuvering that Ly Viet's forces had perfected. We don't have exact numbers on the body count, but let's be honest, 3 days of non-stop medieval warfare. Yeah, both sides took some serious losses. By the time the dust settled, the Mongols were left frustrated, bloodied, and wondering how the heck their unstoppable army had just been outmaneuvered by a bunch of river-wrangling strategists. After finally getting their hands on Vien Kimpe, the Mongols did what Mongols do best. From Bsejeong, they crossed the Hung River, seizing surrounding areas at breakneck speed, cutting off Ly Viet's eastern flank and making sure their presence was loud, messy, and absolutely terrifying. Entire villages were reduced to ash, civilians were butchered, and chaos reigned. Anyone who had "Death to the Tartar" tattooed on their bodies was executed on the spot. At this point, it was clear the Mongols weren't just here to conquer. They were on a full-blown extermination campaign. To them, this was just business as usual. Rivers of blood, mountains of bones, all in a day's work. They were so committed to the conquer first, ask questions, never approach that they truly believed violence was the shortcut to world peace, which, let's be honest, is not how world peace works. Togan was done, absolutely, completely done. He had seen Ly Viet pull the same move over and over. Fall back, regroup, strike again. It was like trying to catch a fish with your bare hands. Just when you think you've got them, they slip away and slap you in the face on the way out. So he sat down and dictated yet another surrender letter. Yes, another one. By now, Togan had sent so many letters to Dai Viet's royal court, I lost count. I could tell you how Dai Viet responded, but do we really need to? Alright, that's a wrap for today, but don't get too comfortable. This story is far from over. The Mongols aren't known for taking no for an answer, and Vietnam, well, they aren't exactly in the business of rolling over and surrendering. You already know things are about to get even wilder, so do yourself a favor. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and get ready for the next chapter of this insane historical showdown. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.